May 22nd, 2019. At 29,000 feet, Anjali Kulkarni is standing on top of the world. The 54-year-old climber from Mumbai is smiling. Her face is lit with a smile of joy, convinced she's achieved the greatest moment of her life. But what she doesn't realize is chilling. The decision she just made has already sealed her fate. This climber is already dead. She just doesn't know it yet. Welcome to the extreme edge. In 2016, Anjali sat in her Mumbai office reading the morning headlines in the newspaper, and what she saw made her absolutely furious. The headlines were celebrating these two Indian police officers, a husband and wife named Dinesh and Tarakeshwari Rathod, and apparently they had just become the first Indian police couple to climb Mount Everest together. The whole country was going crazy for them. There were photos of them on the summit, certificates from the Nepalese government, and press conferences. Everyone was treating them like heroes. But here's the thing. Anjali knew what the rest of India didn't know. She knew that these people were complete liars. You see, a few years before this, Anjali had gone on a climbing trip with the Rathods. They were doing this thing called the Aussie 10 Challenge, where you try to climb the 10 highest peaks in Australia. And according to Anjali, the Rathods had completely made up their success. They claimed they climbed all 10 peaks when they had barely managed to climb 5. So when Anjali saw these same people claiming they had conquered Mount Everest, she immediately became suspicious. And she started investigating. And what she found was absolutely insane. It turns out that the photos that the Rathods submitted to prove they reached the summit were completely fake. Like, not just a little bit fake, completely, totally, 100% fabricated. What they did was they took photos of another climber named Satyarup Siddhanta, who actually did summit Everest, and they photoshopped their own faces on his body. They changed the colors of the boots to match what they were wearing. They even pasted the Indian flag over his hands. It was like the most elaborate Photoshop job you've ever seen, except they were using it to lie about one of the most dangerous achievements in the world. Now, most people, if they figured this out, might just have said, whatever, that's not my problem. But Anjali was not having it. She went to the investigators and provided testimony. She shared everything she knew about these people's history of lying. She told the Hindu newspaper, these are the biggest giveaways. The pictures are clearly morphed. She pointed out technical details that proved the fraud, and along with Satyarup Siddhanta's furious Facebook post about his pictures being used in such fraud, the whole thing got exposed. The Rathods got banned from climbing in Nepal for 10 years. They got fired from their police jobs. The expedition company that helped them gets fined $4,000. Anjali basically helped save the integrity of mountaineering by making sure that liars can't just fake their way to fame. But here's where the irony cuts deep, because just 3 years later, when Anjali stood on Everest herself, she would face a situation where truth and lies about the summit would come crashing back in the most devastating way. Tiny detour on this chaos train. If you'd like to be part of the extreme community, get early access to our videos and exclusive polls, come join us on Patreon. See you there. Now, you might be wondering why Anjali cared so much about exposing the Rathods. I mean, she could have just ignored it, right? But here's the thing. Anjali wasn't just some casual climber. She was the real deal. Anjali wasn't born into a mountaineering family. She wasn't some natural athlete who dominated every sport she tried. She was a regular kid who became obsessed with something most people thought was impossible for someone like her. At a time when Indian women weren't exactly encouraged to pursue extreme sports, Anjali fell in love with climbing. But Anjali wasn't just some reckless adrenaline junkie. She was brilliant. She and her husband, Sherad, were successful business people who built a successful advertising agency from the ground up in Mumbai. This was a woman who could analyze complex business problems during the day and then plan technical mountain expeditions at night. She was methodical, careful, and obsessively prepared for everything she did. By 2014, Anjali had been climbing for 25 years and had conquered major peaks on multiple continents. She and her husband, Sherad, had developed this shared dream. They wanted to complete the 7 Summits Challenge. That's climbing the highest peak on each of the 7 continents. In 2014, after both had turned 50, they decided to go for it. They started their campaign on November 3, 2014, successfully summiting Mount Kosciuszko in Australia. Then, in October 2018, they conquered Mount Kilimanjaro, and there was one mountain that stood above all the rest, the one that calls to every serious mountaineer, Mount Everest. They spent years training specifically for Everest, and they were so committed to this dream that they made an incredible decision. They retired from business specifically to pursue this mountaineering dream. And in 2019, they decided to make history. But something strange was happening on Mount Everest that year. You see, Mount Everest isn't just dangerous because it's tall. There's this part of the mountain called the death zone. Right now, wherever you are, close your eyes for a second and take a deep breath. Feel that? That full breath of oxygen going into your lungs? Now imagine you can only get about 1/3 of that, maybe even less, and you need to take a step at a high altitude with that. That's what every single breath feels like above 26,000 feet. But it gets worse. When your cells are screaming for oxygen, your brain starts shutting down. Your organs begin to fail. You become confused, disoriented. You make decisions that at sea level you would never make. The only way to survive is to get down as fast as humanly possible, because every minute you stay up there, you're losing the race against your own body that's just trying to survive. And in 2019, something made this already deadly zone even worse. Nepal had issued a record-breaking 381 climbing permits for Mount Everest. Tibet issued another 140 on their side. That's over 520 people with permits. And when you factor in the Sherpas and porters supporting each climber, you're looking at more than 1,000 people trying to climb the same mountain at the same time, more than ever before in history. Now, all those climbers can only summit during very specific days when the weather is good enough. Usually, that weather window lasts maybe a week, sometimes 2 weeks if you're lucky. Plenty of time for expeditions to stagger their summit pushes, spread out the crowds, and keep things manageable. But this year was different. In early May, Cyclone Fani, a massive tropical storm, sent its remnants straight into the Himalayas, and it wrecked everything. The teams couldn't even set up the fixed ropes until May 14th because the conditions were so bad. We're talking sustained winds of 40 to 60 miles per hour on most days, and just for context, anything over 30 miles per hour is considered too dangerous to climb. So that entire climbing season got compressed from potentially 2 weeks to just 2 or 3 viable summit days, May 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. That's 3 days to make a summit bid. Picture what that means. Over 1,000 climbers all trying to squeeze through a narrow ridge that's only wide enough for one person at a time in some sections. And if you don't make it through fast enough, you die. It was quite simply a disaster waiting to happen. But Anjali didn't know any of this yet. So on May 22nd, 2019, when Anjali and Sherad woke up at Camp 4 in the middle of the night for their summit bid, only one thought was on her mind. This is it. The moment they've been working toward for 6 years. The moment they quit their entire business for. They and their personal Sherpa guide, Gyaljan Sherpa, suit up and check their oxygen. The weather is perfect. Clear skies. The kind of conditions every climber dreams about. They start their final push in darkness before dawn, and at first, everything is going exactly as planned. Their legs are strong, their breathing is steady, and they're moving well. Hour after hour, they climb higher, with the steady calm and ease of someone with 25 years of climbing experience. But when they get past 26,000 feet into the death zone, they must have begun to notice a strange pattern. They start to see other climbers ahead of them, lots of them, and they're not moving. They're just standing there, bunched up on the narrow ridge, waiting. It's a massive traffic jam at the top of the world, and that's when they get their first hint that something is very, very wrong. In fact, by the time the sun came up on May 22nd, Anjali and Sherad were still nowhere near the summit. They had been climbing for over 10 hours by then, and yet the line of climbers stretched out ahead and was only inching forward painfully slowly. There's this famous photo from that day. It was taken by a climber named Nirmal Purja. and it later went viral around the world. But here's what that photo doesn't show you. It doesn't show the oxygen running out in those tanks. It doesn't show what's happening inside those bodies. Muscles being consumed for fuel. Brains swelling from oxygen deprivation. It doesn't show the thoughts racing through their foggy minds. And it definitely doesn't show the moment when rational thinking just stops. When years of experience, all that training, every instinct that's kept you alive, it all gets overridden by one single desperate thought. I have to reach that summit. That's when climbers stop listening to their bodies, stop listening to their guides and to reason, and that's when people die. And that was what was happening to Anjali. You see, according to her Sherpa guide Gyaljan, at some point during that climb, he could see what was happening. He could see the danger. He told her they needed to descend. But before I tell you how she responded, I need you to put yourself in Anjali's shoes for a second. You've spent $40,000, not money you had lying around, but years of savings. Every extra dollar you and your spouse scraped together. You've trained for 6 years, specifically for this one mountain, waking up early, pushing your body, and planning every detail. You've been climbing for 25 years. This isn't a hobby anymore, it's your identity. You're a mountaineer. You've conquered peaks on multiple continents. You even exposed fraudsters who faked this very achievement because you respected it so much. And now, with an impaired judgment, you can literally see the summit. It's right there, maybe just an hour away if this line just moves. And what do? Do you turn back? Or do you keep going? Anjali chose to keep going. Hour after hour, she pushed through that traffic jam, step by agonizing step, with low oxygen and low energy. And then, somewhere high on that mountain, Anjali collapsed. Her legs just stopped working. Her body had been pushed beyond its limits for more than 18 hours in the death zone, and it simply couldn't go any further. Here's where the story gets even more tragic, because what actually happened depends on who you ask. According to expedition officials and most news reports, Anjali had made it. She had stood on the summit with Sherad. They had achieved their dream together before her legs gave out on the descent. But Gyaljan, her personal Sherpa guide, the man who was actually with her, tells a completely different story. He says she never reached the summit at all. He says she collapsed while still trying to get there before she even made it through the worst of that traffic jam. So there are two completely different accounts here, and we may never know which one is true. What we do know is that somewhere high up on Everest, the woman who dedicated so much energy to preserving the integrity of mountaineering, who had fought so hard to expose Everest fraud, became yet another statistic whose own summit claim we can't even verify. There's actually video footage of what happened next, and it's one of the most haunting things you'll ever see. In the video, you can see Anjali clinging to the fixed rope. Her left hand is gripping it, but the rest of her body is just collapsed, completely bundled up in her mountaineering gear. Two Sherpa guides are there, desperately trying to hold her up, trying to get her to move, to keep fighting. And then you hear one of them speaking to her in Hindi. His voice is urgent, almost pleading. "I had told you to go down, didn't I? But you said it is okay." And all you can hear from Anjali in response are these weak, gasping breaths that are getting fainter and fainter. I can only imagine how those Sherpas must have felt in that moment. The Sherpas tried everything. They tried to carry her. They tried to help her clip and unclip from the ropes. But in the death zone, there's only so much anyone can do. Your own body is failing. You can barely help yourself, let alone carry someone else. Anjali Kulkarni died on Mount Everest on May 22, 2019. The official cause of death was altitude sickness and exhaustion from oxygen deprivation, because she had spent too many hours in a place where the human body cannot survive. The death zone had lived up to its name. The 2019 Everest climbing season ended up being one of the deadliest in recent history. 11 people died on the mountain, and Anjali was one of them. But her death wasn't just another statistic. It represented something deeper about what Mount Everest had become. You see, Everest used to be the domain of only the most elite, experienced mountaineers in the world. But over the past few decades, it's been commercialized. Now, if you have enough money and basic climbing experience, you can hire a guide service to take you to the top. This has made the mountain accessible to more people, but it's also created new dangers. Some of the guide services are excellent. They have experienced leaders, proper safety protocols, and they're not afraid to turn clients around if conditions aren't right. Just like Yaljan did, even though Anjali insisted on continuing. But other services are basically just taking anyone who can pay, regardless of their experience or fitness level. It's become like a high-altitude tourism industry, except the consequences of poor decisions are just a bad vacation, their death. And then there's the issue of permits. Nepal makes a lot of money from Everest. Climbing permits cost over $11,000 per person in 2019, and this is minus all the money that climbers spend on guides, equipment, and logistics. And to make things worse, they issued more permits than ever before, even though they knew the mountain's infrastructure could not safely handle that many people. But here's what's so tragic about Anjali's story. She wasn't one of these inexperienced, wealthy tourists. She was a genuine mountaineer with 25 years of experience. She had done everything right in terms of preparation and training. She was climbing with reputable guides. She had a legitimate reason to believe she could succeed. And yet, she still died. Because Mount Everest doesn't care about your resume. It doesn't care about your experience, your preparation, or your dreams. Above 26,000 feet, we're all just fragile human beings trying to survive in an environment that wants to end our lives. After Anjali's death, her husband, Sherad, fell into a deep depression. Unlike Anjali, he had achieved their dream and reached the summit successfully before learning what had happened to his wife on the way down. For months, he struggled with guilt, grief, and the question of whether their dream had been worth the ultimate price. But then, Sherad made a decision that I think shows the kind of people he and Anjali really were. Instead of giving up on mountaineering entirely, he decided to honor Anjali's memory in a completely different manner. In 2023, at the age of 60, Sherad returned to Mount Everest, and this time, carrying his wife's photo with him, he made it back to the top as a way to remember her and becoming the oldest Indian climber to summit Everest in the process. He completed their 7-summit goal, climbing the remaining peaks that he and Anjali had planned to tackle together. And in a beautiful tribute, Sherad planted 30,000 trees, one for each foot of Everest's height in Anjali's memory. His reasoning was profound. His wife died from lack of oxygen, so he would create oxygen in her memory. It was his way of giving back to the earth that had taken his wife, but had also given them so many years of joy and adventure. I think Anjali's story is a reminder that pursuing your dreams always involves risk. The question isn't whether to take risks, it's about taking smart, calculated risks and knowing when the potential cost is too high. Anjali died doing what she loved, pursuing a dream that had driven her for decades. And while her death is tragic, there's something admirable about the way she lived her life, with passion, dedication, and a willingness to challenge herself in the most extreme environments on Earth. The mountain doesn't distinguish between the experienced and the inexperienced, the prepared and the unprepared. In the death zone, we're all just human beings pushing against the absolute limits of what our species can survive. And sometimes, despite our best efforts and preparations, those limits push back. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay bold and live brave.